Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our press conference regarding the Fiscal Plan 2022 Certified Budget for the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico and the Certified Updated Fiscal Plan for the Puerto Rico Highways and Transportation Authority. For those of you that are online, remember you can submit questions through the chat box or use the raise hand button. Mr. Chairman, you can begin.
Okay, we have a question over here. And Sylvette, I'll let you.
Here. Okay.
I'll let you take the questions.
Okay.
If you.
Cyber News.
Good morning. Still good morning, yeah. Two questions. First one, are you willing to revisit the plan of the HTA after you heard the comments of the governor about the increase of the tolls, and also that the administration is willing to consider another alternatives to reach the same amount of money without increasing the tolls? That's the first question.
And the short answer to that is yes. We have a fiscal plan in place. Whatever is done needs to be consistent with the fiscal plan. But if there are ways to raise revenues that are different from what we propose in the fiscal plan, we'll certainly entertain them. We will not entertain ideas that are simply reducing the revenues without reducing the expenses. But we will consider all alternatives.
Before the second questions, I would like to make sure if there is a reaction to that. In Spanish, basically, the board is always willing to evaluate different proposals with respect to the fiscal plan. Recently, we approved the fiscal plan for HTA, I'm sorry, but if the government has different ideas, the governor has different ideas on how to reach the same amount of revenue, we will evaluate it. What's critical is that we cannot accept or make changes that will reduce the revenues without reducing the expenditures, or alternatives that reduce the revenues but that keep the same expenditure. Therefore, we welcome all those ideas and we're willing to evaluate them.
It's about the RSA about PREPA. The governor also says that he would like to revisit the plan, and there's been the controversy about the sun tax or the fee that the people that maintains in the system, the PREPA system, should pay. Are you also willing to revisit that one and be clear about what the cost, if any, should be for the people who produce her own energy and also maintains in the PREPA grid?
So I'll give a short answer, and then I think Justin wants to say something as well. As we've said many times, we think that the RSA has enormous benefits for Puerto Rico. It reduces risks. It reduces the potential transition charge. We have presented to the legislature what they need to pass for the RSA to work, and we have asked them to pass legislation that will make the legislation, the RSA, work. And so that's where we are right now. If they were not to pass the legislation, we'll consider other alternatives. We will restructure PREPA's debt, but the best, smoothest existing way forward is to make the RSA work.
El vocero.
No, I think Justin
wanted to say.
I agree with all of that, and I would just emphasize, as it relates to this transition charge, everybody who's connected to the grid pays that. So it is not directed at people with solar panels. It's everybody who's directed to the grid. And so I hope that people will stop referring it to as a sun tax, because that's just not true.
Yeah, I prefer the term equitable contribution. If you're on the grid, you need to contribute to the legacy cost. You need to make your equitable contribution.
En español. La Junta en este momento,
The board at this
ya ha
point
entregado a la legislatura,
has already delivered to the
llamado
legislature the
para que
RSA
ellos lo evalúen.
for them to evaluate it.
Realmente nosotros
The
entendemos
truth
que
is,
el
we
RSA
see that the
provee unos
RSA
grandes
provides
beneficios para
great
Puerto Rico,
benefits for Puerto Rico
y provee equidad
and provides
en términos de los
equity
cargos a todos
with
los
respect to the
consumidores.
charges and the fees for all consumers.
Repitiendo un poco lo que dice
Repeating
Justin,
a little bit to what Justin said, RSA is not a charge to the sun, it's not a sun
lo que
tax.
sí contiene es un
What it
cargo de
contains
transición
is a transition fee
requiere que todos
that
los
requires that
consumidores
all
que estén
consumers from PREPA who are connected, they must pay for being connected.
que no esté conectado al sistema.
If you're not connected to the system, you don't have to pay that charge.
Estamos esperando
We're
la decisión de la
waiting for the
legislatura
decision for the
si aprueban ese
legislature
plan.
to see if they approve the plan or
En el
not.
caso de que
In
la
the
legislatura no lo
case
apruebe,
the legislature
nosotros
does not approve it,
responsabilidad
we'll have our
de
responsibility under PROMESA to restructure
y vamos a
PREPA.
continuar con el
And we're going
proceso,
to continue with the
para
process
lograr entonces
to
un acuerdo.
achieve an agreement.
Pero
But
lo crítico aquí es que
what's critical is to understand that RSA provides
realmente un acuerdo sumamente beneficioso.
it is a very beneficial
para los consumidores
agreement
de
for
Puerto
the
Rico,
consumers
y
in Puerto
entendemos que
Rico,
cualquier otro acuerdo
and we understand that
probablemente
any
va a ser
other
más caro.
agreement is going to be more expensive.
I'm going to follow a question from the journalist online. This is from Danica from AP. She's asking, is there a deadline to implement the proposed toll increase, find a source of revenue? If so, when?
Let me turn that over to Alejandro.
So the prior fiscal plans for HTA have included and reflected an increase in or an adjustment in the toll fares. So what the current fiscal plan, the certified fiscal plan, does is that it reflects the schedule that has been in place for prior years. So toll fares should have been adjusted in January 1st of 22 this year. However, consistent with the statements that the board members have said today, the board is focused on HTA generating the revenue. So even if the increases are delayed as they are today, if the government is capable of generating the revenues, then they will be consistent with the fiscal plan. But to the specific questions, the deadline was January 1st of 2022.
Next question,
El
El
vocero.
Vocero.
Hello. Yeah, if the RSA doesn't provide a way forward, if the legislature doesn't approve the RSA, what's the alternative? What does the alternative look like? Because we've heard about the imposition of a receiver that will hike up rates immediately. Could you give us an idea as to how that looks like, and has that been discussed? Has that alternative been discussed with bondholders?
So I'll give an initial reaction and see if others want to make comments as well. If the legislature were not to pass the RSA, there are alternative avenues to a restructuring. It is possible to restructure the debt without the legislature being involved. That said, going in an alternative direction is more risky. If it would mean abandoning the RSA, it would mean the creditors could try to exercise their remedies, which is where you hear about requesting receivers and things of that sort. So there certainly would be risks. But we will move forward with this, and I'm still optimistic we're going to be restructuring PREPA's debt within this calendar year, hopefully under the RSA, but if it's not the RSA, we will go to Plan B, and Plan B can operate without the legislature.
And I agree with all of that, and I would just underscore that Plan B, unfortunately, would be more expensive for Puerto Rico. So it's a time for choosing, and so hopefully Puerto Rico's legislature will choose to pass the enabling legislation for the RSA.
Okay, I'll repeat in Spanish.
If the legislature decides that they will not approve the RSA, then we will continue working to restructure PREPA. We have different alternatives. There are different avenues that are legal that we can continue doing. So, including the negotiation. But it is important that we all understand that that will only add a lot of risk to the process. It opens the door to the bondholders to keep pursue different legal paths. We have talked about receivership, and there's a concern that the consumer will end up in a worse position if the RSA is not approved. Having said that, at the board we will continue working to ensure that we can find the best possible solution, and we are always looking for the way that we can provide the solution that is the most equitable for all the consumers of electric power in Puerto Rico.
Oh, I just had a follow-up question.
Okay, go ahead.
And in either alternative, in either case, are you confident that the PREPA Teeth Title III could be resolved this year?
Yes.
Whether through Plan A or through Plan B?
100%.
100%.
100%.
I'm not quite as optimistic as Justin is, but I am quite optimistic. I do think it's doable this year.
We'll do our best.
Yeah, we will do our best to get it done this year.
Next question is from John Marino. If the RSA can't be executed, there's a payment penalty the Commonwealth has to pay?
There is not. The bondholders can terminate the RSA. At this point, we can terminate the RSA. There is not a payment penalty.
Okay. Next question, Noelia.
Hi, Maria Soledad from Nuevo Dia. I would appreciate some clarity on what those alternative avenues are. Is the Plan B the receivership? Also, is there a timeline or some indication that you would have as a guide to maybe go back to Title III and push the legislature through Title III to approve the RSA? Through the Title III court, And it's not just the legislature. The governor just said that he wants to renegotiate or have a look again at the RSA. So how much wiggle room is there is for some change to the current RSA?
So there are a lot of different questions packed in there, and I'll just say that the smoothest way forward is for the legislature to facilitate the RSA, to pass the legislation that is needed. There is not, in my view, a middle ground alternative where you change the RSA, then the legislature approves it. They either approve it or they don't approve it. That's what we're asking them to do. If they do not approve the legislature, or if the legislature does not approve the RSA, we'll go back to the drawing board. And we've been thinking about this. It's not like we'll be starting from scratch. We've been thinking about what the alternatives are. We will negotiate with the bondholders. We'll negotiate with the other constituencies. We'll potentially challenge constituencies in various ways, and we will move forward. So there really are two paths. One path is for the legislature to do the right thing and to pass the legislation needed for the RSA. The other is to go back to the drawing board, but we've been working on the drawing board, and we'll be ready to move forward.
Next question.
CPI.
Yes, hi. I just have three quick questions. On the PREPA RSA, is that the unanimous position from the board to not revisit the RSA and push forward with current terms?
I think I'll let other board members speak for themselves, but I believe the unanimous position of the board is the legislature should facilitate the RSA, yes.
No, but in terms of the current term sheet, for example, of the RSA, the position from the board, is it unanimous to unanimously move forward as is? Not revisit anything, not change anything, just push forward with what you have right now.
So I'll say yes. I mean, it is for the current RSA, and speaking for myself, probably other board members would agree. if you start tinkering with the RSA, it's not the RSA anymore, and you're going to end up losing some of the benefits. It's going to be a different deal, and so there is a deal that was delivered to the legislature. All it needs to be done is for it to be approved. If you start tinkering with it, it's not the RSA anymore, and we're on to Plan B, and we're revisiting everything.
I understand. And in terms of the rate increases in the HTA, how will the board, you already said that the government has not implemented rate increases as the fiscal plan says. How will the board force those rate increases that you are now proposing in the new fiscal plan? If the government rejects or refuses to do so, as the governor said.
So I think the answer to that question is that first we need to see what the government provides. As you said, they have a study which they claim supports their position that the fare increases that are reflected in the certified fiscal plan are not necessary, or in those, particularly the catch-ups in the first 3 years. Our position is that they are necessary in order to ensure that HTA is sustainable. And that it can only not only ensure that it can pay its restructured debt, which is essential for exiting Title III, but it can also spend money in investing and maintaining the roads in Puerto Rico at a level that is higher than what has historically been the investments level at HTA. So the board will work with the government in making sure that those objectives can be achieved.
I understand. Just a follow-up, like, given the scenario that no agreement is reached, that they're not able to provide that information or satisfy the board's, concerns, and the board still pushes for a rate increase that is not approved by the government, how will the board force those increases exactly? Through the plan of adjustment of HTA, for example? Like, how will those rate increases take place if the government ultimately refuses to do so?
I think if and when we get to that point, then the board can, see what options it has available to them.
And the last question, just a matter of, in terms of the executive directorship, how's the process of, if you can shed some light on how the board is moving to replace Natalie Yaresco as the executive director?
I'll just say, generally, we're sorry that she is going to be stepping down. We're enormously appreciative of what she's enabled us to do, the huge restructuring, the biggest public debt restructuring in American history. She was central to. We are moving forward on a search for a new executive director. I can't give you specific details. I can only say that it's quite an active search, and I'm confident that we will find a replacement who will enable us to finish what the board is here to do.
Do you have a deadline to complete that process?
Not a deadline. We'd like to complete it as soon as possible. We'd love to have somebody in place by the time Natalie Jaresco steps down. She's with us for a little more than a month longer, and we'll sort of deal with where we are when that day comes, or when we find the person. We have a tremendous staff. We have a huge amount of expertise. We are a finely tuned running machine, and we will continue moving forward. So we're very optimistic about where we stand, and hopeful that we'll find the right person to replace Natalie sooner rather than later.
Whoever it is would have, as David said, really big shoes to fill. And so we're not going to rush the process. We want to make sure we get the right person.
That's good.
Next question, Foro Noticioso.
Good afternoon, Medina. You pointed out before that to have changes, there must be a balance between the expenditures and the revenues. I ask you now, what projection for revenues, if you have that, with respect to the toll increase versus the revenue that exists in such a way that it could be avoided? You can see the fiscal plan on the website for the board in terms of the details of the numbers. In the macro, we have some increases in the tolls. As mentioned before, there has been no increase in more than 10 years, more than a decade, and we know the conditions of our roads. All Puerto Ricans, we pay the price when we have a flat tire for the maintenance, additional maintenance for our vehicles because of the conditions of the roads. Therefore, we are establishing, setting a balance between restructuring of the debt, the revenues necessary to have capital investment, and give the adequate maintenance of our infrastructure. Therefore, it is recommended, we recommend certain increases to take that revenue and use them and meet the expenditures. That's thinking about the situation that we are projecting, that there is an inflation, the economy is not fine, people's pocket, it's money in the pocket is less and less, and things are increasing because things go up, but the pocket stays the same or goes down. Is that being considered? We are living, we agree, we have a very high inflation. However, at the same time, today, we are closing an important chapter in Puerto Rico, which is Puerto Rico's bankruptcy. The fact that we come out of the bankruptcy, that the fiscal plan will be approved together with the balanced budget that we presented today, allows Puerto Rico to come back to economic growth period. We have some grounds that we didn't have before. We have capitalization with federal money to really fix our infrastructure, work with the problems that we have in the system, like education, and to move forward our economy. So we have to take everything into a larger context. We cannot move our economy if we keep the Commonwealth or any other instrumentalities in bankruptcy. So we have to have plans to get those instrumentalities out of the bankruptcy and look forward to the economic growth. Medina, there have been some public concern about the use of escorts by a member of the board. I would like to know for you and Mr. Skill, what is the explanation that you offer to the country, to the island, about the use of escort services, security escorts paid with public funds? There are people who say that the board should also adjust and that there is no need for such protection by the police.
I don't hear the question, so go ahead.
So I'll answer in English and then I'll talk in Spanish because I want to hear my other colleagues to hear the answer. The board has a policy for all board members to have police given the type of decisions that the board makes and the potential for different opinions from the board. And that is a policy that applies to every board member independently. I did not request to have police escorts, nor do I feel that I need to have police escorts all the time, but as a policy matter for the board, I was asked to have police escorts to ensure that any potential issues that might come up could be properly addressed. Would you like to comment?
I'll just confirm what Antonio said. It is a board policy. We strongly encouraged Antonio to have, and others, to have the security assistance. It's good practice, and we've had that policy since day one, since the board was first put in place.
You know, I'll add as well, just to reemphasize that the board is a volunteer unpaid board that spends hundreds of hours on Puerto Rico, and it's very important that that we do have the ability to operate and to operate safely. And again, it was, from my perspective, I mean, Antonio resisted having the full-time security, but it is something that the rest of the board really encouraged him to do, given the situation.
There are no more questions?
Español.
In Spanish.
Sí, muchas gracias por la pregunta.
Yes, thank you very much for the question. Summarizing what the colleagues have said, the members of the board don't receive economic compensation. We do this work in a voluntary way, and we don't receive any compensation for being at the board. The board has a policy that to all its members, it is security is provided, given, right, just like the government and the governor and other positions. We are involved in decisions that affect many of the citizens from the country, and there can be different opinions about the decisions that the Oversight and Management Board takes. In my personal case, for the first 4 or 5 months, I really told them that I did not need it, that I did not want to have it, but through the different topics that we have been working on, it was requested to me to accept the escort as part of being member of the board, and the same way that it is provided to all the members of the board as long as they are in Puerto Rico.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
If there's no more questions, we finalize this press conference. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.